There's two terms within alchemical practice, or within Daoism rather I should say, which are Wuwei and Ziran. And these terms really, they epitomize the kind of foundational quality for the mindset, or the way that the mind interacts with the body or with any exercise or any process in Taoist practice. So Wu Wei, most people would translate as none doing. Wu without, Wei to do, none doing. And Ziran, most people would translate as natural or nature. So we have none doing and natural. So you'll see this spoken about in certain ways. I mean, I think one of the weakest ways to translate Wu Wei is when people literally say to do nothing. The Taoist does nothing. So it's a very literal and slightly very inaccurate translation to say that Taoists should just sit around. I even saw one book that say that the aim of the Taoist is to be fat and happy, as in they just lay around eating and sleeping all day because of this principle of Wu Wei. But if you've ever engaged with Taoist practice, you know, it's actually very hard work. It's very demanding. Alchemy is very complicated. Taoist martial arts are quite involved. Taoist Qigong and Daoism at their high level are quite involved and hard work. So it doesn't, the aim is not to be lazy in Taoism. It's not what non-doing means. And Ziran people translate as nature, as in what is around me, the beautiful sea, the beautiful trees, or whatever. And okay, that's nice, but actually I would translate it a little differently, because to me terms like Wuwei and Ziran apply to practice, cultivation. Remember, Taoists were spiritual cultivators. That's what they were interested in as much as anything, certainly with regards to the core of their tradition. Whatever else they did around it, that was always their core aim. So to me, Wu Wei means none contrivance or none governing rather than none doing. Not quite the same, little translation difference. So in English, what I tell people is, when I teach, this is a difference between attention, paying attention to something, being attentive, or intending, doing, which is not what Taoism is after. But the Wu Wei they are talking about, the non-contrivance, the non-governance, is primarily the way that your mind interacts with the process. So if, for example, let's take the breathing. Say I'm doing an exercise for my breath. It can be something very simple, just simply paying attention to the rising and falling of the breath or something like this. Now, if I were applying my intention to the breathing, I would deliberately try to change it. I might try to make it longer, I might try to force it into something, I might try to push the breath to a certain place. But to Taoism, this would actually be, in many cases, a slightly incorrect way of applying your mind to any process. What they would advise is Wu Wei instead, which is, instead of intending to change the breath, I simply pay attention to it. My attention is passive, my attention is neutral. I'm listening, ting. I don't try to change it. If you listen to something, you're not involved, you're just paying attention. And that pure, passive, neutral attention that I pay to a process is the Wu Wei, non-contrivance or non-governing. So when I breathe, and I pay attention to my breathing without changing it, then what will naturally happen is, if I'm applying Wu Wei, attention, not changing it, not contriving it, it will move towards Ziran. Ziran is the result of Wu Wei in this case. It's a causative chain. So then Ziran, instead of meaning nature, which okay, you can kind of see, natural maybe, but I would actually translate as self-regulating, self-regulating. So if I none contrive and I none govern and I pay attention to a process like my breathing, then what will happen is, after a while, if I'm able to successfully pay attention and not try to get involved, it's Ziran, self-regulation will arise. The logic being that there is a body intelligence, an intelligence to the qi, an intelligence to the processes within the body, so that if I can pay attention to it, it will self-regulate and it will move towards the most optimal position that it can be in. And certainly my personal experience of alchemy and Qigong is that's true. I find that the times when I've made the most errors or got stuck or plateaued is when I've tried to contrive, I've tried to do. When actually, when I've just successfully paid attention to any given process, it has self-regulated and the practice has unfolded for me. Now that doesn't mean there's no method. There's always a method. There is something that we must pay attention to. So there's always that skill, isn't there? Where is the way, the doing or the contriving, and where is the Wu Wei, the non-governing or contrivance? How do we marry them up? So for me, a tradition gives you the practice or the way, the governing, the contrivances that you can do, which might be to, I don't know, develop the Dantian or something. There's millions of processes, you know, it depends what you're working on. And the Wuwei would be the quality that my mind is in, that attentive quality my mind pays to that process while it's unfolding. Yeah, so there's a tricky balance between the two. I think almost all internal practices can be affected to their detriment, shall we say, if we over-contrive. And I think the Taoists spotted this long ago, which is why this idea of Wuwei that leads to Ziran, self-regulation, arises. I mean, ultimately, one of the principles of Chinese medicine, which obviously has a connection to Taoism, even if it's not fully sourced from it, certainly has a large influence from Taoism. It's definitely an idea in there that many of the illnesses, imbalances and sicknesses in the body are because we subconsciously or unconsciously over-contrive into our body, as in the influence that our mind, our emotions, our thought processes have upon the body. This would be a kind of contrivance, a kind of doing. If I am angry, and that is bubbling away in the background, then that quality of anger is sort of subconsciously contrived into my body, and that creates the imbalance. So again, even with regards to their health, they would point into the idea that Wuwei should lead to self-regulation, self-healing. So obviously this is a principle that can be applied in many, many different ways to many different exercises, but I just wanted to do just a little discussion to get thoughts going maybe on these terms, or at least how I see them through the way they've been taught and the practice that I've done. So thank you.